people with expired non-disclosure agreements. What is the juicy information you can now tell us? Had to sign an NDA in order to reforest an artillery range that was last active in the 1920s, just in case we found some high-tech military secrets from 90 years ago. Nothing wild. Worked for a luxury hotel that celebrities frequented when in the area. We had Cat Williams on property when he was still touring and popular. Apparently a housekeeping manager walked in to check how the cleaning of his room was going, and to her surprise the lady who was supposed to be cleaning was kicked back smoking a blunt with the guy. Hilarity ensued and she was canned, but got a great story out of it at least. Sure. I was on the team that designed SpaceX's Starlink factory in Redmond, Washington that never got built. From start of project to finish it only took 4 weeks, a record. SpaceX also wanted a 50-foot deep hole in the middle of the building, but we weren't told why. Building was around 80,000 square feet. Also, Elon likes to have a back door on all of his factories for which only he has a key, so that he can secretly enter the building and watch the goings on from a little alcove above the floor. If you have a Comcast voice remote and you say, "Make Robert happy," it will turn the TV to Doctor Who. There used to be a lot of hidden voice commands in the system. We had to take a lot of them out over time, but that one is still in there. A couple people have asked me who Robert is. He is one of the software engineers working on the voice remote system. As a proof of concept early on he put that in, and just never removed it. Some people are asking for another one. If you say Big Boss it'll make your TV go to an empty page left over for the Minions movie, and make your TV play a minion noise. It seems they removed a lot of them, but that one is still there too. I served on a board that had kidnap ransom insurance for all the board members. A condition of the insurance was that we could tell no one that we had kidnap ransom insurance. My old landlord building company paid all expenses for me to break my lease, move out and get all my possessions heat treated after I came back from study abroad to bed bug infestation. They didn't want other residents to know. If they threatened to sue they could get their stuff treated. I was given a near-fatal overdose of Tylenol as a toddler at a daycare called La Petite. The young worker walked away when I was on a diaper changing table when I rolled over and fell off. I ended up breaking my femur and was understandably wailing my little cubby head off. She was afraid to get fired, so she kept feeding me painkillers until I stopped crying. Turns out that's a bad thing. Well, safe to say I spent over a week in the hospital and some time in a full body cast. My legs got stunted just enough to make my legs just a bit shorter than my torso in proportion. Medical bills were paid, and I got $25,000 in an annuity. Plus the girl got fired but not prosecuted. My parents refused to press charges on her cause they believe in second chances and forgiveness. That the charter school I taught for was in reality a Scientologist school. We had to do training in Scientology after school for 2 hours a day. We had to sign our NDA to get our $1,000 bonus for doing the non-elective training. Those parents had no idea the school was Scientology. We did not teach them how to be Scientologists, but we certainly used the terminology and L. Ron's ideas. This was about 25 years ago, before we knew much about Scientology. I didn't buy in, and I wasn't invited back the following year. The school dissolved about 4 years later. I assume mine expired when they fired me. If not, I don't care. So here goes. We tested essential oils for at least 2 MLM companies, and their claims are complete nonsense. The only ingredient in the formulation on the report I read that had any antimicrobial efficacy was the coconut oil. They were aiming to show how their products were germ killing, but the only germ killing component was the vehicle, what is basically the base, usually the inactive ingredient. They will still instruct their sellers to say things like, "Our oils kill toxins or cancer," or whatever, but almost none of these claims are proven or registered with the EPA or FDA. If they are, they can be accessed online, hence the term, registered claim. All of my NDAs come from working in film and video production, so there really isn't too much juicy stuff. But the one thing that has always stuck with me is Jessica Chastain gets whatever the F she wants, whenever the F she wants it. To add, totally forgot, Drake is terrified of owls. Not an NDA, but I wasn't allowed to talk about our celebrity guests at the hotel I worked. Not working there anymore so. JK. Rowling smokes cigars. Michael Bay is an okay dude. George Michael was a bit of a tosser. Robert Downey Jr. is incredibly down to earth. I worked the bar. He was very straightforward about him not drinking. Heston Blumenthal is really nice, even if a bit demanding. Mine isn't expired, but I don't care. They can come after me if they want. Honeymoon at a sandals resort, and it went bad. Not like some people's where it involved assault, but personal belongings were destroyed. Kicked out of the room we got moved to after ours was no longer safe to stay in. That sort of stuff. The NDA says we are not allowed to acknowledge we were ever even on the island. Jokes on them. I had no interest in posting about it until they presented us with the NDA that said we couldn't. Thanks for the idea. My friend signed one that has since expired. It had something to do with higher ups in his company skimming off the top and making a ton of money before they got caught. My friend got involved because he told his manager that he found a ton of money missing from one transaction, or it hadn't been released yet or something like that. He was quite shook up about it for a few weeks. I worked at a printing company outside DC in the late 90s/early noughts. We did work for the government from time to time. We printed materials for the investigation into the Branch Davidian cult in Waco, Texas. There was tons of aerial photos of the compound, and for some reasons David Koresh owned many cameras. They were mostly old beat up ones, but there were a few dozen on the compound. Posado's safe haven oversold their memorial dog cottages. So when a donor, they cost $10,000, came to visit their dog's memorial cottage that they donated $10,000 for, Posado's would have to swap out the memorial plaque. Super shitty. My wife was born in Vietnam. Her mother met and married a Navy officer, and he adopted my wife and her sister and got them all out of Vietnam in 1972, saving their lives. The majority of my mother-in-law's family were well-off business people and were ethnically Chinese and were executed by the communists. My wife's dad passed away long ago, and my wife never did learn very much about his time in the Navy. All she could tell me was he was involved with submarines. 3 years ago we visited my wife's mom in Hawaii, and she gave us a trove of stuff, pictures, and papers she thought were related to his Navy career. The first thing I find is his service record. Holy crap, my wife's dad was a badass. Joined the Navy in 1940, was chief mechanic on submarines during World War II, earns 3 battle stars. Then all kinds of work on advanced submarines. Then later in his career some really weird assignments, like hauling stuff up to Alaska for defense radar sites, or decommissioning ships that were used in nuclear bomb tests. It took a couple of weeks, but one day I noticed that his naval career ended in 1960, but my wife said he was a naval commander when he met my wife's mother. I asked my wife about this, and she was a bit confused. I asked what his uniform was like, and she says khaki pants, white shirt. I tell her that it doesn't sound like he was in the Navy and she must be mistaken. Then she tells me this beauty. No, he had to be in the Navy because he went somewhere in a submarine and came back with crabs. I had to translate the argument between him and my mom. I'm really confused now, so I look at some other paperwork we had from the trove. There was a folder that contained some certificates from a Chicago-based air conditioning repair program, plus a certificate for electrical work, dated 1961. Then the real answer revealed itself. It was his employment documentation for USAID. Turns out my wife's adoptive father was CIA station chief in Saigon during the Vietnam War, and she never knew. Her dad never revealed anything. I was a construction worker on Madonna's townhouse in New York City. Had to sign a NDA to not reveal client. This is because it's just a normal New York neighborhood, and she didn't want anybody to know it was her house. When we had our coffee breaks, people would always stop on the sidewalk and ask whose house this is. My friends tirelessly prayed for me to disclose, but I never did. Before anyone asks, all I will say it is on the Upper East Side. I was one of the pilots for some stunt flying scenes in a recent episode of Fear the Walking Dead. The only bummer was that a good chunk of our efforts, particularly the highest risk ones, were left on the cutting room floor. Stuff like landing on and taking off from a small country road with power lines and trees on either side and at either end, with very little room for error widthwise. That ended up being the cakewalk. The real kicker was having to land at night on an old runway surrounded by 6 80-foot camera/lighting booms that only served to blind us, it seemed, landing mere feet away from actors, with the runway edges only being lit by a string of Christmas lights. Those lights had to be turned off for a good portion of our final approach for the sake of the scene, but we made it work. It took 3 separate attempts, but they got the shot. Despite the best parts of our scenes being cut, it was personally rewarding to know that we nailed every bit of flying they asked us to do, and the production team was comprised of nothing but top quality individuals. Was a very cool experience. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and part 2 is coming tomorrow.